Zola Levitt Presents with Dr. Jeffrey Seif and Sandra Levitt. As dark clouds ominously loom over the horizon, radical Muslims charge the atmosphere with brazen disregard. As the sun sets over Christian Europe, sleeping Christians need to wake up, non-Christians need to get up, and moderate Muslims need to rise up. Bad Moon Rising.
Hearty shalom to all of you. Jeffrey Seif here with my friend Sandra Levitt.
Shalom and welcome back to Bad Moon Rising. We're talking about evil. We're talking about the different ways that evil presents itself in the world. We've looked at the Holocaust. We're still going to look at the Holocaust. In fact, Jeff, you're going to go into a place that they almost got the atom ready.
Deep underground,
Oh,
stealthily, they were working on the atom bomb.
I cannot imagine what would have happened if they really had developed that atom bomb.
Thank God that Americans got involved in the
man.
European situation, or it would have all come unglued.
You have to really stop and think, what would the world have looked like if Germany had won?
Well, there wouldn't be Jews to look at. Zola Levitt Presents wouldn't be presenting.
That's right, but gratefully, I'm grateful that we're here. And
it would have killed us all off.
And so what are we doing here? What is the purpose of this whole program, this whole series? What is the purpose?
We want to look at the Bible. We want to look at history. We want to put the two together and let the world know that inasmuch as the devil was working through the Nazis in a bygone era, that wickedness is raising its hoary head in another form. We'll bring the two together for you in a moment. Haigerloch is arguably one of the most beautiful towns I've ever been to. Situated on the edge of the Black Forest. It is just a town that's beautiful, it's private, it's secluded. One of the highlights of the town is a beautiful castle that was owned by the Habsburg, and it was passed around a few times. And there attached to the castle, as was the habit, is the placement of a church dedicated to St. Anne. A beautiful place, a beautiful castle, a beautiful church. You know, there's a tradition of placing beautiful relics beneath churches, dedicating then the communion altar to a particular memory of a particular person that dedicated the church. Now, what's interesting about this church in this town is that the Nazis, under this church and under that altar, dug deep, and directly underneath it, they manufactured a facility to split the atom and throw the Third Reich then into the atomic age. And they came ever so close. As students of history might recall, the race was on as World War II was pressing to a conclusion here on the European theater. The Nazis came this close, and at this place, they were experimenting down here with the splitting of the atom, the enrichment of uranium. I don't want to talk too much about it. I'm not an expert in that field. But there are experts that have come and studied here and written on the subject. This is the place. And the fact that they did it right underneath a church, for me, is striking for a variety of reasons. It's demonic. And when I think about it, if you'll permit me to muse some, the Nazis came this close to an atom bomb. They came this close to the V-2 rocket by which they could then launch their unconventional weapons without needing to send aircraft. That would have been decisive in the war. And they came this close, they already had jets in the air. You know, we won that war, and thank God that we did. And as a Jew, I do mean that sincerely, never mind me being an American on top. But technology was escalating up, and thank God we got it by the grace of God just before it was too late. And it's here, in this place under a church, in what's arguably one of the most beautiful villages that I've ever been to. And I've been to more than one village. It's so quaint. It's so quiet. It's so unknown, and it's for this reason that the Nazis wanted to obscure what they're doing, decided to put finality to their experiments on splitting the atom here, and then transferring the knowledge from it to a research facility, the model of which is here, all with an aim to win the race to get an atom bomb out. While reflecting on how fortunate we were to stop a culture, a bellicose culture, a militant culture, driven by a demon-inspired philosophy, as close as we were back then to putting a halt to their interests in formidable weapons. This, by the way, reminds me at a certain level of where we are at this very day. And now I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but I do want to inform that we do well to be alarmed. And I'm not speaking on my own authority in making that point. When I think of authorities, I'm reminded of how Benjamin Netanyahu, a former Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, a former prime minister there in the nation state of Israel, warned not long ago. I heard him on TV. Our film crew went there and got the shot, in fact, where he said, listen, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in Iran is threatening to do in 12 minutes what Hitler couldn't do in 12 years. That is to say, with his gearing up with nuclear armament, that he can do by pushing a button what Hitler couldn't do with all the buttons he pushed and all the favors he called upon as he was developing his war machinery here in Nazi Europe.
It is possible that the only comparison that we can make of this danger, of this terrorist fanatic mentality acquiring weapons of death, is the attempt 60 years ago by Hitler and Nazism to acquire atomic weapons. And you know that history would have taken a far different course if that happened. So this is something that must be stopped. The attempt of Iran to arm itself with nuclear weapons, the fact that it denies the Holocaust, can you imagine? While they're announcing that they'll make a new Holocaust. There's a reason why they're denying the previous Holocaust, because they'd like to pave the ground for a new one. And I think this is a very great danger for all of us. It is terror multiplied to the nth degree. It is something that has to be stopped.
Wonder. The beauty. The soul of the Holy Land. For more information on our next tour to Israel, call 1-800-WONDERS. For insightful perspectives of Israel and Bible prophecy, ask for our free monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter. When you call, be sure to also ask for our free catalog with the latest videos, books, and music. Our correspondence course, the Institute of Jewish Christian Studies, includes reading packets, teaching CDs, and mail-in tests. You may want to join us on an upcoming tour of Israel and Petra, or cruise the Mediterranean visiting Greece and Ephesus. Please contact us for more information.
I think there's reason to be alarmed, and it's not that I want to be an alarmist. At issue isn't so much the fact that there's a nation state that has nuclear capabilities. God knows there are nations that have already come clean with their nuclear programs. The issue isn't an Iranian state as any state having a program, as much as the fact that this program is in the hands of an individual and of a regime that's hell-bent with their own vocabulary in decimating Israel. And the fact that they're given to the destruction of Israel, to me, is striking. They're too far away to do it conventionally. Never mind the fact that other Islamic states roundabout have tried on more than one occasion since the founding of the fledgling state in the late 40s. all to no avail. No, with the development of a nuclear program and the pushing of a button, someone can do something. Annihilate a nation state. Now there is reason for concern, not just because a nation state has that capability, but because that very same nation state has expressed their own intention as a core value, not something that's marginal, not something that's peripheral, but a core value being to, quote, drive Israel into the sea. And the fact that this core value is attached to a philosophical perspective that resonates deeply is cause for concern as well. And by that I mean, if one looks at the Shiite program, it is in part fueled by, never mind a nuclear or atomic reactor, the reactor, the driver beneath this interest in the nuclear age. The driver is an eschatology. It's a sense of a last day's purpose for an Islamic regime to make its entrance onto the stage of the human drama. And there's Mahmoud Ahmadinejad that is given, in his own estimation, of being the John the Baptist of the new Islamic world order, a harbinger of an imam who's going to arise from history and be in effect the Islamic Messiah. And there are portents of bad things to come in conjunction with that, of a world gone bad, a world at war, and a nuclear program seems to factor into that. Now, at the risk of sounding like an alarmist, speaking to individuals that watch this program in America, Europe, the Middle East, and elsewhere, my question is it unreasonable to be concerned? Is it unreasonable to think we need to put a stop to that? And I want to raise that question here in part because we're at the place where the Nazis came ever so close to doing that very thing, and thank God that we nipped it in the bud. Now my question is, do we do well to be able to at some point in time say, thank God that we developed a mechanism to decisively deal with the Iranian threat, or do we let it just escalate up unchallenged and then deal with the results when the buttons get pushed and all of a sudden we're looking at nuclear rain? Now, again, I'm not an expert in the physical sciences. I'm a Bible teacher, and against that backdrop, what I want to do is bring out a biblical message. Not to be, overly prophetic. I don't lay siege to the claim that I understand exactly, precisely how everything plays out, but I do know that there is biblical text that lends credence to an understanding of a world ablaze in fire, and it seems more than just conventional fire, and at least raises the possibility, and I'm not alone in raising it, that what we're looking at here prophetically and pathetically in the literature is attestations to a world gone bad, a world set ablaze with unconventional weapons. And the reason why I mention that is if one looks in Ezekiel, chapter 38 in verse 19, God says, "For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath I have spoken." Now he speaks of the fire of his wrath, and I don't want to take a leap to talking about fire, as being God's judgment, as in nuclear, based on that verse. It's what follows it that to me is rather striking. He says, and I quote, in verse 21, "I will call for a sword against the mountains." And he says, "I will bring judgment," in verse 22. And I want you to listen to this. And then he says, "And I will rain down on him, on his troops, and on the many peoples who are with him, flooding rain, hailstones, fire, and brimstone." Let's explore that in a minute. When I come back, I want to do just that.
That's Jeff and the Adam Keller. We will look at Jeff next week, same place, talking about Ezekiel, continuing the teaching in Ezekiel. It is amazing to me how close the Germans came to getting an atom bomb. It just simply amazes me. The teaching was wonderful. To see the church and to see the Adam Keller underneath was just incredible. The beauty and then the evil underneath. amazing to me.
The contrast is striking. And you know, our viewers afford us the opportunity to go places where people don't go. To teach the Bible, to get the word out there in the world and put it all together.
I don't know that we would have seen that any other place. I don't know that I've ever seen any kind of footage on that. And that really was an education for me to see all the goings on, the machinations of the workings of an atom bomb.
Well, you know, like you said on the front end, thank God that we were there as Americans. That is, because had we been sluggish and not gotten into the game, then the world would have been markedly different.
That's right. Nobody else came to the aid except the Americans.
Well,
I think that's just amazing.
Certainly, Europeans looked at Americans as redeemers then. Now people are a little ambivalent.
But they shouldn't be. We are. We're trying to be redeemers. We're trying to make the world the right place, and that's where we need to.
And others. You know, there's a silent army all over Europe and all over the world. There are people that are saying enough is enough, and we're going to stand up and we're going to speak up.
And one of those people is Ted Pearce. He is a nice young man, upcoming writer, songwriter. He went to this march, and it changed his life. Here's Ted.
In America, I think our problem is that we think we can buy anything. Healing through pills or whatever. We really think we can buy anything. And I think that's going to cause us a lot of problems in dealing with our enemies in the world, is we think we can buy them. And we don't understand that money isn't everything to everybody like it is to Americans. If I had to go for the root of the problem, that's what I'd say it is. Yeah. We don't understand the kind of hatred that's being directed at us. You know, again, because we think we can buy love, or at least buy respect. And so I don't, too many Americans, not all of us of course, but too many Americans don't have no grasp of the situation because they have nothing to compare it to. They, you know, there are millions of people in the world who wake up with nothing on their mind except how are we going to kill the Jews and the Americans and the Christians, and we wake up obsessed about Britney Spears' haircut and Anna Nicole's baby. So we don't understand. We just don't understand.
Ted's good people. He's regular people. He's an ordinary guy that had an extraordinary vision, and he threw his energy behind it. Now he travels as a music minister, teaching about Jesus, singing about the Jews, putting it all together. Great guy, isn't he?
He is. In fact, his sister-in-law works for our ministry.
Yeah.
So, and it's just been a real blessing to get to know both of them.
I knew him before he was engaged in full-time music ministry. Now he's a rising star in the whole music world.
You mentioned Ted Pearce, and everybody loves what he does.
Yeah.
But I liked his interview. I really liked the points that he made about Americans being so concerned with celebrities, being concerned with that we think we can buy anything in the whole world. That's our problem. And if some of these interviews and some of these things that we've seen doesn't make people stand up, what are we going to do, Jeff? Yeah. Really, what is it going to take for us to stand up and say that's enough?
Well, I think we need to stand up, and it's good to have stories of those who do.
Yeah, and then we're going to look at Ergun Caner, who Zola interviewed. Really a sweet guy, dean of seminary at Liberty College, and just one of those things that Ken calls again and says, we're bringing a Muslim over to interview with you. And it makes you pause for a moment until he walks in the door, and he is a new creation, and he loves the Lord. And I really, really want you to watch this.
All right, so we're attacked, and now when I go on a speaking engagement, everybody wants to know why do they hate us? Why does the Koran really teach that they should kill us? This sort of question.
Oh, Dr. Levitt, you and I both face this. And wherever we speak, whenever you go in a place and I go in a place, we hear this on television, in the news, in the radio, that we hear these apologists for Islam saying, jihad is a struggle. You know, it means we are peace-loving. Islam means peace and submission, and it does. And in America, the vast majority of Muslims are horrified by what took place. But that's because here in America, jihad is a theory. There has never been a declared jihad by the caliphate, by the leaders here in America. In Europe and in Israel and in the Arabian Peninsula, it's not theory. It's life. It's what we live with. What gets to me is that you can say that's what we teach, but we don't follow that. But you cannot redact. You cannot go back and change what the Quran says. As a young man, I was in the Islamic youth jihad. as was my brother, and both of my brothers. We were in the youth groups that were taught these verses of the Hadith.
The Hadith you keep mentioning
Yes.
is Muhammad's sayings.
Muhammad's sayings, yes, the sayings, almost every one of them says it's narrated by someone, and then Muhammad said, and this is their quote. I'll give you an example, Dr. Levitt. The Hadith 950.
Why don't you call me Zola? Nobody calls me Dr.
I
Levitt.
can't. You're a man I've watched on television my life. But Hadith 950 says, no one can be killed for killing an infidel. Hadith 957 says, if a man changes his Islamic religion, kill him. That's not ambiguous.
Yeah, it's not ambiguous, but it's very strange. I don't know any other religion that says if you convert somewhere, they're going to kill you.
And it's very straightforward. It's very straightforward. There is in the Quran a redaction. They would say Abraham was not a Jew or a Christian, but was a good Muslim. I mean, that is a quote in the Quran.
I've heard it.
And so there is a redaction, but for now, for these men to come on television and say, we don't believe in jihad, jihad is not that, that's a misunderstanding, to me that's disingenuous.
Is it really holy war to sneak in and bomb people eating pizza? This kind of very cheap...
The acts of jihad are, in theological terms, they're hierarchalists. They believe that the end justifies the means. And so to kill innocents, the blurring of the line, even here in America, is now, there are no civilians anymore. We are all soldiers. And in jihad, that's a teaching.
It just doesn't make sense, Ergun.
Those children in a pizza, eating their pizza there in the quadrant of the old city of Jerusalem, they are part of the struggle. Either they are against us or they are with us. And if Muslims who died in the World Trade Center, who were in the World Trade Center itself, they believe they died as martyrs as well. And so even though they were civilians, had nothing to do with it, perhaps even nominal Muslims, they believe they are immediately translated into paradise. The promise was this, the promise in the Quran and the promise in the Hadith is the teaching that if you die as a martyr in an act of jihad al-asghar, in an act of a declared jihad, you are forgiven. All the scales on the left shoulder are erased and all your bad deeds are forgotten and you are translated to the highest level of paradise. And so the promise was made. Muhammad Atta and the rest of them
That's the terrorists that flew the airplane into the World Trade Center.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They were promised immediate forgiveness and translation to the highest level of Allah's abode, which they call paradise. Jihad is a very particular act. There are very specific rules.
Yeah, tell me there's three levels of the jihad. This is the Arab war, so to speak.
There are many people who go to the websites and find the guides that were written and the letters written to the terrorists before they went into the World Trade Center of what they had to, the steps they had to follow before they actually got on the plane. Acts of shaving, acts of ablution and washing, and acts of putting on cologne. And there are certain acts that you must go through. Jihad is very specific. There are three levels to jihad, or three acts of jihad that are extrapolated in the Hadith and in the Quran. The first act is that act of shock, an act that takes the infidel and shakes him out of his comfort zone, which...
They sure accomplished that in the World Trade Center. My God.
How much more can they shock us? The second act, however, is when jihad is described in terms of an act of vulnerability, to show us that as much as you protect yourself, you are now vulnerable. You are still susceptible to attack. And so a second act of jihad may not be here in America. It may be embassies. It may be in England, but something where we are thinking that we are protecting ourselves and secure, and yet the act cuts to the heart of it. The third act of jihad is an act of humiliation. It is supposed to emasculate the people, and in so doing it cuts us off at our knees. It totally makes us the weaker vessel, and thus we're overtaken. That's the way jihad is traditionally taught. If we had not acted swiftly as a country, if we had not acted swiftly and loudly, and our president going on television and saying, oh, this is war, this was an act of war. If we had not, then we would have been perceived as weak. And in that perception, they would have done much worse. The response would be much worse because a weak enemy is to be overtaken. A strong enemy is to be engaged. For those who are fighting this struggle, the jihad, to them, anything is justified in the act of fighting Allah's glorious cause. You listen, every time bin Laden goes on the tape, he is praising those men, calls them martyrs who did this heinous act. Because to them, the end, which is the purpose of winning Allah's land back, in the case of Jerusalem, or to fighting against the Satan, which is the purpose here in America, that's the ultimate end. And so the individual isn't important. The corporate aim is that which is supreme.
Dr. Caner is a great guy, and he reminds me that the Lord gets into people's hearts, no matter their background, Islamic, Hindu, whatever, and God can change people and bring us together as a people of one.
Well, an unbeliever becomes a believer. Their hearts change. Paul says we are a new creation, and we are a new creation. That's what's so interesting about Ergun Caner, was that he walks in the door and he is a new creation. And you could see it in his face. His demeanor is wonderful.
And I believe that he carries within his heart the answer for the world, and that is to be born anew, to be recreated, to become a new creature in God's Messiah, Jesus.
Absolutely. We're talking about peace. The peace, Hebrew is shalom. Islam means peace, it means submission, but they also say salam, which means peace.
Right. I mean, if you're not from the culture and don't know the language, they sound alike.
Right.
People think that Islam's the religion of peace.
Right.
And I say yes, they want to have a piece of this and a piece of that country and a piece of this. And once they have all the pieces, then there'll be peace on earth because they have the puzzle.
But that is their agenda. They make no apologies for it. They are very open and say, we want the whole world to be Islamic, either by the sword or any other way we can take it. They're going to do it.
Right, and I want the world to have peace by the sword, and it's the sword of the Spirit.
Amen.
That's the Word of God that pierces hearts and invites people to be transformed in Jesus' name.
And isn't that what we want for anyone that's listening to us? God bless you, and Shalom Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Our offer on this program, The Iranian Menace in Jewish History and Prophecy by Dr. Jeffrey Seif. In this timely book, Jeff explores a variety of ancient Jewish texts and considers how Jewish interpreters of these texts insisted that in the last days an evil empire would emerge from Iran, from which it would threaten Israel and the world. A must addition to your library. Ask for The Iranian Menace by Dr. Jeffrey Seif. And you may also call toll-free for our colorful monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter. This free publication includes Bible lessons, insightful news commentary, Hebrew lessons, and more. Call 1-800-WONDERS. That's 1-800-966-3377. Or write to Zola, Box 12268, Dallas, Texas 75225. You can also see our Levitt letters, TV programs, and national airing schedule at www.levitt.com. Please remember, Zola Levitt Ministries depends on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you. This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.